Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are completely tearing up the conventional timeline of human settlement to explore the epic 24,000-year journey of the very first peoples of the Americas.
For literally centuries, archaeologists and anthropologists kinda got it wrong. They focused on a timeline shaped heavily by just the last 500 years, and because of that, they incorrectly framed the Americas as this blank slate. But honestly, calling it a new world completely erases tens of thousands of years of rich, incredibly complex human history.
But here's what's actually super fascinating right now. We're finally seeing a beautiful synthesis of different fields. Western science, stuff like archaeology, genetics, and climatology, is converging with traditional indigenous knowledge, like oral histories, ecological memory, and linguistic tracking. And together, they reveal this deeply complex history of diverse groups migrating and settling over millennia. It wasn't just one group on one single path. It was this massive, dynamic web of human movement.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're gonna hit 5 main stops: beyond the New World myth, crossing ice and sea, a warming, changing landscape, diverse cultures and communities, and finally, the rise of agriculture. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Beyond the New World myth. Let's start with the extreme geography that actually made human presence here possible. Picture this. Way before the oceans rose to where they are now, there was Beringia. And listen, this wasn't just some narrow little ice bridge. We're talking about a massive, 600-mile-wide exposed seafloor on the northern Pacific Rim. This vast volcanic steppe tundra connected Asia and North America. It was packed with grasses, low vegetation, and giant grazing animals. It was a thriving ecosystem all on its own. And crucially, it allowed two totally distinct, ancient founding populations from Siberia to cross back and forth. Moving right along to Section 2, Crossing Ice and Sea.
So when exactly did people start navigating this intense landscape? Well, human arrival wasn't just one single event. Pacific Coast navigators were arriving between 15,000 and 24,000 years ago. I mean, we even have incredible fossilized human footprints from White Sands National Park in New Mexico dating back 23,000 years. Just think about that. And by 14,500 years ago, we're seeing settlements as far apart as central Texas and Maryland. This is way before the later waves of overland and coastal migrations.
Now you might be wondering, how in the world did they pull that off? Indigenous ancestors brilliantly took advantage of the lower sea levels. They expertly navigated ocean currents and followed marine life along the Pacific Rim Islands. By doing this, by literally piloting the ocean waves, they managed to completely bypass a daunting 2,500-mile stretch of solid, impenetrable coastal ice that ran from the Bering Strait all the way down to modern-day Washington State. It is just an absolute masterclass in maritime survival. All right, Section 3, a warming, changing landscape.
Fast forward to about 19,000 years ago. The planet starts getting warmer and wetter, and glaciers globally just start melting. We're talking about ice sheets up to 2 miles thick, going through these intense freezing and thawing cycles. And as you can imagine, this massive release of fresh water flooded the oceans, spiked sea levels, and physically carved out entirely new waterways and valleys right across the continent.
And the result of all that warming? Absolutely profound. Those newly thawed lands basically exploded into incredibly diverse ecosystems. The mid-Atlantic turned into rich forests of spruce, pine, and oak. Down south, the Gulf coastal plains transformed into these shallow, life-filled wetlands. And the Great Plains, they opened up into vast grazing areas. This ecological boom naturally prompted indigenous travelers to follow their four-legged relatives inland, moving away from rising floodwaters and straight into these abundant new biomes.
Which brings us to Section 4, Diverse Cultures and Communities.
As the climate kept fundamentally changing the landscape, the tools, cultures, and spiritual practices of these communities rapidly evolved to match their specific environments. Take the coastal Pacific Northwest, for example. At Haida Gwaii, an archipelago off the coast of British Columbia, skilled ancestors didn't just survive the elements, they completely thrived. They harvested salmon and boldly navigated the ocean in these massive, handcrafted cedar log canoes to fish and hunt whales and seals. Their entire culture was beautifully shaped by the generosity of the sea and the forest. You can actually see this deep reliance on the ecosystem in their cultural artifacts. For instance, traditional yellow wood Yupik masks from Alaska often feature figures of seals, which was a hugely important traditional food source for them.
These were used in ritualistic dances by shamans. It was a profound way to ritually bridge the natural and spiritual worlds, paying deep respect to the animals that literally sustained their lives.
And this incredible diversity wasn't static. It just kept growing. Between 10,000 and 8,000 BCE, the Nádane, the hunter-gatherer ancestors of the Apache and Navajo, crossed the Bering Strait before making their way down to the American Southwest. Much later, right around 3000 BCE, the ancestors of the Aleut and Inuit peoples arrived, making their homes on the islands of current-day Alaska.
But listen, surviving these wild, extreme climates, that took way more than just individual grit. It required immense social and political coordination. To successfully hunt surviving megafauna, like bison and caribou in massive seasonal drives, these folks couldn't just operate in tiny, isolated bands. No way! They had to build highly sophisticated political and social networks, working together in large, coordinated groups.
All right, final stop, Section 5, the rise of agriculture.
So right around 6,000 years ago, the Earth's climate really begins to stabilize. Indigenous communities start leaving much more permanent physical traces on the land. By the time we hit the medieval warm period around 950 CE, communities are increasingly turning to agriculture to meet their nutritional needs and to solidify their societies. And this major shift sets off a chain reaction that leads right up to the late 15th century.
Agriculture was literally a game changer. It allowed indigenous leaders to secure real political power. It enabled the construction of massive societal structures and permanent cities. It supported wildly diverse societies across mountains, prairies, deserts, and forests. Basically, agriculture meant that instead of constantly moving, societies could root themselves, build upward, and expand outward.
And all of this, thousands of years of environmental adaptation culminating in the rise of agriculture, leads up to a mind-blowing milestone. By the end of the 15th century, the estimated indigenous population in the Western Hemisphere reached an astonishing 100 million people.
Let's put that 100 million number into perspective. Roughly 50 million people were living in Europe at the exact same time. Yep, the Americas had literally double the population of Europe. That single data point right there completely obliterates the persistent, deeply flawed myth of an empty, sparsely populated new world just waiting to be discovered. It was a thriving, bustling, incredibly active hemisphere.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. How does recognizing this sheer scale of human resilience, ancient maritime innovation, and complex societal growth forever change how you view the true history of the Americas? Because honestly, when we stop looking at this continent as a new world and start seeing it for what it really was, a 24,000-year epic of survival and adaptation, the entire story changes. Thank you so much for exploring it with me.